Think of a moment that changed everything. Not the big one, the quiet one. The one that felt like nothing at the time, but looking back it rearranged your whole path. Now ask yourself, what if that moment wasn't random? What if you were never drifting, but being drawn? There's a thread running through your life. You can't always see it, but you felt it. It tugged at you when you hesitated before leaving. It tightened when you walked away from something you once begged to keep. It frayed when you ignored what you knew deep down. It wove back in, sometimes gently, sometimes with force, whenever you were ready to see what it had always been trying to show you. You thought you were making decisions. You were, but maybe the timing wasn't yours. There's a story, two brothers in Bermuda. One is killed by a taxi while riding his moped. A year later, on the same street, the other brother dies the exact same way. Same moped, same taxi, same driver. Even the passenger was the same. You can call that luck, you can call it nightmare. But what you can't call it is random. Some events are too symmetrical. Too sharp, too eerily timed to dismiss as background noise. You've lived through your own version. The stranger who showed up when you were about to quit. The wrong turn that made you cross paths with someone who never left. The yes that came the moment you gave up on ever hearing it. We like to think life moves in straight lines. It doesn't, it spirals. And in every loop there are echoes, repeated signs, familiar places, names that return when you least expect them. Jung called this synchronicity, a moment where the outer world lines up perfectly with the inner world, not through logic, but through meaning. And you felt that before. You've walked into places that felt like memory. You've heard words from strangers that felt like answers. You've woken up with a dream you didn't understand until it started happening. This isn't superstition, this is pattern recognition. And your life is full of patterns you've been too busy to notice. But now, maybe for the first time, you're starting to look back. And what seemed like noise starts to look like arrangement. The thread doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you follow it, if you allow it to pull you through the spiral, you start to see that it wasn't chaos. It was choreography. The coincidences that led you here were never random. They were the instructions hidden inside your own forgetting. The beat beneath the silence. The call you almost missed, and now you're listening. You don't know it when it's happening. You just feel the discomfort, the delay. The confusion of a door closing when you were sure it was your next step. You don't know it's redirection. You just know it hurts. And then years later you see it. The map makes sense, but only in reverse, the missed opportunity. It saved you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. The heartbreak? It hollowed out the space where real love would one day fit. The failure? It taught you the one lesson success never could, how to begin again. There's a story from the Civil War. A Confederate officer drops a cigar wrapper, nothing special. Inside, by pure accident, is a copy of General Lee's battle plan. Union soldiers find it. That piece of paper shifts the momentum of the war and clears the path for Lincoln to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, a dropped wrapper, and the future changes. Sometimes the hinge of history is barely visible, and the same is true in your life. You think you're making decisions, and you are. But the timing, the people, the openings and closings, those are part of something larger, something recursive. Life is a spiral. It brings you back to the same places again and again, not to repeat, but to reveal how much you've changed. You return to the street where you grew up and realize it's not smaller, you're just bigger. You hear a song from the past and it doesn't hurt this time, it frees you. That's how you know you're not stuck, you're circling upward. Clarice Lispector once said, "A man's way of looking constructs the house." Maybe your whole life is built not just from events, but from how you've chosen to see them. And the coincidences. They're the windows, the cracks in time where light gets in. You won't always recognize them when they arrive, but you feel it in your body. The moment that lingers longer than it should. The moment that returns in dreams. The moment you keep thinking about 10 years later because something about it still feels unfinished. That's not coincidence, that's choreography. The coincidences that led you here were never random. They were the spiral you couldn't see from the inside. And now that you've risen above it, now that you can see the loops, the echoes, the returns, you begin to realize you were never lost. You were circling something sacred. And now you're closer than you've ever been. There's a kind of silence that lingers long after the pain ends. Not because it wants to haunt you, but because it's waiting. Waiting for you to ask what it meant. Waiting for you to stop calling it a detour and start calling it direction. Some pain isn't random. It arrives with uncanny timing. It interrupts what you thought your life was becoming. And somehow it ends up becoming your life. In 1995, Sonny Graham received a new heart. The donor had died by suicide. Years later, Sonny met the man's widow. They fell in love, they got married. And then, in a cruel loop that no logic could explain, Sonny died the same way by his own hand. Same heart, same end. Same silent thread tying two strangers through love, grief, and something that defied coincidence. We don't know what to do with stories like this. They don't sit cleanly in boxes labeled science or faith. They disturb us because they feel familiar, no, not in form, but in sensation. That feeling that you've inherited something more than biology, that your grief echoes someone else's, that your heartbreak arrived too perfectly timed to be meaningless. There are things you carry that didn't start with you. There are scars inside you that weren't just injuries, they were coordinates. Your pain didn't just arrive to hurt you. It arrived to move you, to collapse one version of your life and clear space for the one your soul had been begging you to choose. We're taught to treat pain like a fire alarm, something to escape. But what if it was a lighthouse? Jung believed the unconscious doesn't just store memory, it whispers guidance. Not with words, but with repetition, with dreams. With signs you almost understand, a name you keep hearing, a symbol that keeps showing up, a feeling that returns right when you are about to forget. These are not glitches, they're map markers, placed by the part of you that knew what you needed long before you could ask for it. Antonio Porcia wrote, "They will say you are on the wrong road if it is your own." And that's the paradox, isn't it? The more true your path becomes, the more alone it may feel. Not because it's wrong, but because it hasn't been walked before. That's what wounds do. They separate you from who you were pretending to be. So you can finally become who you really are. You were never off course. You were being disassembled, not to be destroyed, but to be reformed. The spiral brought you back again to the place you feared, not to punish you, but to show you what you'd learned, what you were ready to carry, and that scar. It's not a flaw in the thread, it is the thread, woven back in, stronger than before, the place where meaning lives now, where pain became precision. The coincidences that led you here were never random, especially the ones that broke you, because they didn't just change your story. They became the reason you can now hold someone else's pain and not look away. Have you ever walked into a moment that felt too perfect to be real? A phone call you needed. A word someone used that matched your dream. A face in the crowd that you felt like you'd already known. You call it coincidence. But deep down something else stirs. A strange sense of alignment. Like the world just cleared its throat to get your attention. Anthony Hopkins once needed a rare book for a film role. He couldn't find it anywhere. Then one day, out of nowhere, he spotted it, left behind on a bench. Same edition. Same notes in the margins. Later, he learned it was the author's personal copy, lost and somehow found. You hear that story and feel something. Not because it happened to you, but because it reminds you of something that did. That time you almost left, and someone stopped you. That day you felt hollow, and the right message appeared. That song, that photo, that name, they don't explain themselves, they don't need to, they're not proof, they're reminders. Jung called this synchronicity, a bridge between what you feel and what unfolds. A dialogue between your soul and the story it's living. But maybe it's even deeper. Maybe it's not the universe that speaks. Maybe it's you, calling yourself forward. From the future you're already becoming. Clarice Lispector said, "A man's way of looking constructs the house." Meaning, the moment you believe you are being guided, you are. Because you begin to pay attention, you start to notice, and noticing changes everything. The stranger becomes a mirror. The silence becomes a sign. The missed opportunity becomes a reroute, so perfect in its timing you almost want to cry. Maria Zambrano wrote, "To love is to see ourselves as another being sees us." Maybe that's what these moments are doing, loving you through timing, through return. Through impossible threads you couldn't have woven yourself. You were never forgotten. You were just being rerouted toward readiness. You won't always see the meaning right away. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes falling apart. But then you look back and what once felt disconnected now feels symphonic. That dream you had in your 20s. That loss you couldn't make peace with. That person who showed up at the wrong time and still changed you. They were never random. They were placed, not to be understood, but to be met. And now that you've learned the shape of the thread, how it tugs, how it loops, how it returns, you realize that everything you're becoming is a reflection of what always knew where you were going. The spiral didn't just rise. It turned you toward the mirror, so you could finally see yourself. Not lost, not late, but arriving. There's a moment in every journey when the doubt shows up, not as a storm, not as a scream, but as a whisper that sounds like reason. Maybe you're just seeing what you want to see. Maybe all these moments were just statistics playing dress up. Maybe life's not that deep, and that doubt, it's persuasive. Because it wears the voice of intelligence. It speaks in probability, in logic, in equations that erase mystery. It tells you that the perfect timing, the impossible return, the conversation that echoed your thoughts, were all just accidents. A big universe doing what big universes do. And maybe sometimes that's true. But what doubt forgets is how it felt. The stillness. The heat in your chest. The hair rising on your arms. The ache that whispered, "Pay attention." Because some things don't land like data, they land like memory, like you already knew. Like part of you had been waiting for that moment your whole life. You want to explain it, but you can't. And maybe that's the point. Sadi wrote, "What is meant for you will reach you, even if it is beneath 2 mountains. What is not meant for you will never come, even if it is between your 2 lips." You've seen it play out. The things you begged for that never came. The things you ignored that wouldn't stop showing up. The moments you thought were delays. That turned out to be precision. Maybe not everything is scripted. But maybe some parts of your story were written in ink older than your name. And here's the paradox. You can't always choose what arrives. But you always choose what becomes sacred. That stranger on the train. That sentence in a book. That road you didn't mean to take but did. You get to decide what it meant. You get to give it weight. That's where the power is. Not in proving the universe is magical, but in acting like it might be and watching how your life shifts when you do. Saint-Exupéry said, "The meaning of things lies not in the things themselves, but in our attitude toward them." And if that's true, then maybe coincidence isn't the proof you need. Maybe it's the invitation to move more slowly, to listen more carefully, to follow the thread even when it feels irrational. That's the art of it, not control, not explanation, but participation. You can choose to see chaos, or you can choose to see choreography. The thread has always been there. But only you can decide whether to pick it up and follow. And that's the real miracle. Not that everything is planned, but that you are brave enough to make meaning anyway. The coincidences that led you here weren't random. They were the ones you chose to believe in. The ones you let matter. The ones you dared to say, this means something. And that choice changed everything. Look around, not with your eyes, but with your life. Look at everything that had to happen for this moment to exist. Every delay, every wrong turn, every no, every ending. The person you didn't become. Or the plan that didn't unfold. The dream that cracked and never reformed. Now feel this, you're still here. And not just standing, but becoming. The spiral brought you back again and again. Not in circles, in a sense. In quiet elevations disguised as repetition. You didn't realize it, but you were rising the whole time. That heartbreak, you carved space. That failure, it revealed your foundation. That silence, it softened you into someone who could finally hear. You weren't late. You were being ripened by time. You were walking toward a self who already loved you, who left you signs in dreams, who lined up the detours so you'd learn to trust the delays, who planted clues like breadcrumbs, not to test you, but to guide you. The coincidences weren't just anomalies, they were echoes, they were coordinates. They were the future calling itself back through time. You are not behind. You are precisely where the thread needed you to arrive. Not because you forced it, because you followed it. And now everything looks different. Not because life changed, but because you did. You stopped rushing, you started listening. You remembered what you forgot, that everything sacred begins disguised, even this moment. Especially this moment. You were meant to hear these words. You were meant to remember the time you almost quit. You were meant to feel the thread again, tugging, tightening, stitching it all back together. This isn't hindsight, it's recognition. The scar, the spiral, the silence, it all adds up now. You see it, you feel it, you know it. The coincidences that led you here were never random. They were the rhythm of something ancient and personal, a choreography you didn't write but chose to dance anyway. And now? Now you have something to give back. Tell the story. The one coincidence you still can't explain. The one that made you believe, even if only for a moment, that you were being guided. Write it, speak it, share it. Because someone else is searching for their thread right now. And your story might be the one that helps them find it.